They say some moments haunt you forever. It's been 2 years since that afternoon. Since my stepson walked into the kitchen while his father was away. And everything I thought I knew began to fall apart. I was slicing vegetables. The kind of simple task that makes you feel useful, even when you don't feel seen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Just like it had been for months. My husband. He'd left that morning for another work trip. Another excuse. Another 3 days of silence I'd grown used to. We used to talk. We used to touch. Now we just coexisted, like roommates with too many locked doors between us. And then, I heard footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. I didn't even turn around at first. But I felt something. That stillness that creeps in right before the moment that changes everything. When I turned, Liam was standing in the doorway. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me. Not like a stepson. Not like a boy. But like a man seeing something he wasn't supposed to want. I should have said something. Should have broken the silence. But I froze. Not out of fear. Out of something I didn't want to name. He stepped closer. And still, I didn't move. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I wasn't thinking about my husband. I wasn't thinking at all. I just remember the look in his eyes. And how, for the first time in what felt like years, someone was actually looking at me. That moment didn't ask for permission. It didn't wait for logic. It just happened. And everything changed. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because what happened next left me questioning everything I believed about love, loyalty, and being a mother. I'm 38. Or maybe I should say, I was. Because somewhere between who I was and who I became, time got blurry. I used to be full of life. Bright. Curious. The kind of woman who'd laugh so hard she'd snort and not care who heard. Now, I measure my days by the sound of a door closing or not closing at all. Ethan, my husband, isn't a bad man. He's just somewhere else all the time. Physically, he's in meetings, conferences, flights. Emotionally, he's gone. I used to think we were building something. Now, it feels like I'm just holding up the scaffolding by myself while he checks into another Marriott. He used to touch the small of my back when I cooked. Now, he scrolls through emails while I talk. Sometimes I catch myself mid-sentence, realizing he hasn't heard a word I've said. And then there's Liam. 18. Tall like his father. But quieter. Different. He moved in full-time 4 months ago. There'd been tension with his mom, something about boundaries, school, and a new boyfriend. Ethan didn't ask. He just told me. Liam's moving in next week. I hope that's okay. Of course I said it was okay. What else could I say? At first, Liam was polite, respectful, distant in that way teenagers usually are, present, but always guarded. He'd nod when I asked him if he wanted more food, say thanks, and disappear upstairs. I didn't mind. I didn't expect much. But something shifted a few weeks ago. He started staying in the kitchen longer after dinner. Started asking me questions about random things, music, movies, even my favorite color. He started noticing things about me, little things. Like how I always added cinnamon to my coffee. Or how I rubbed the scar on my left wrist when I was nervous. And his eyes. There was something in them. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't innocence either. It was curiosity. Curiosity that sat just a little too long in the room. Curiosity that made the air feel thicker. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was projecting because I was lonely. Because no one else looked at me like I was still alive inside. But deep down, I knew. He was seeing something. And worse. I felt seen. The house we live in is big, open spaces, tall windows, modern decor. It's beautiful, but it's cold. Ethan picked the furniture. I just filled the drawers. I spend my days folding clothes that don't smell like anyone anymore. I cook dinners no one sits down to enjoy. I wipe down surfaces that were never touched. I go through the motions because what else is there? Most days, I feel like wallpaper. Just there. covering something that nobody wants to look at too closely. But Liam, he looked. And the way he looked. I should have trusted that uneasy feeling in my chest. I should have known that no gaze lingers that long without consequence. But I didn't. Ethan left on a Thursday. 3 days in Chicago. Some logistics seminar or executive strategy thing. He rattled off the title like it mattered to me. He kissed my cheek at the door, barely glancing up from his phone, suitcase already rolling behind him. "Don't wait up," he muttered. As if I ever did anymore. And then, it was just me and Liam. The silence settled in fast. Not the awkward kind, no. The kind that's too familiar, like a second skin. That morning, Liam came downstairs early. Earlier than usual. He didn't say much at first, just poured himself a glass of orange juice and leaned against the counter, watching me move around the kitchen. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You don't have to do everything alone, you know." I turned, surprised. He wasn't smiling, just looking at me with this quiet sincerity that made me forget what I was doing for a second. I laughed it off. "Old habits," I said, brushing it away. But he didn't laugh. "Let me help today," he said. "Vacuum, dishes, whatever." I hesitated. But I nodded. Why not? We spent the morning doing chores together. Nothing dramatic, just parallel. Folding laundry side by side. Clearing out the fridge. Reorganizing the pantry. Small things. Mundane things. But there was something in the quiet between us that didn't feel so mundane. He asked questions again, what I liked to cook, what music I listened to in college. He told me stories from school. About how his mom used to say he'd be a heartbreaker. And when he said that, he looked right at me. Held the moment a little too long. I looked away. That evening, I must have dozed off on the couch. The last thing I remember was the low hum of the TV, some old rom-com playing in the background, and the feeling of my eyelids growing heavy. When I woke up, there was a blanket over me. The lights were dimmed. The TV was still on but muted. And Liam was there, sitting at the edge of the other couch, elbows resting on his knees, just watching me. I sat up, startled. He didn't move. "How long have you been sitting there?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. He shrugged lightly. "Long enough to make sure you were safe." Those words. They shouldn't have meant anything. But the way he said them, calm, low, careful, made something shift inside me. I smiled weakly, trying to make light of it. "Well, thanks for the rescue," I joked. But he didn't smile back. Not right away. His eyes held mine, and there was something there. Something unspoken. Something I wasn't ready to name. "You looked peaceful," he said. "You don't usually look that way." I didn't know what to say to that. And in that moment, in that silence between us, I felt my heartbeat in places I'd forgotten existed. I stood up quickly, murmured something about getting ready for bed. He didn't follow. Didn't say goodnight. Just kept watching. Like he was studying something fragile. As I climbed the stairs, I told myself it was nothing. That he was just being sweet. That I was reading into it because I was lonely. But in the mirror that night, I caught my own expression. And it wasn't confusion I saw. It was anticipation. I dismissed it. I buried it. But that comment, "long enough to make sure you were safe," it stayed with me. Long after I turned off the lights. Long after I slid into the cold side of the bed alone. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked myself why those words felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to enjoy. But I didn't. Not yet. It started with the coffee. I didn't even realize he was watching that closely. But one morning, I walked into the kitchen, and there it was already made. A splash of oat milk, 2 scoops of cinnamon, no sugar. Exactly how I take it. He didn't say anything, just slid the mug toward me with this casual kind of smile. Like it was nothing. But to me, it wasn't nothing. Because Ethan hadn't remembered how I took my coffee in years. Then there were other moments. Little things. Liam would linger in doorways. Not in a creepy way, not at first. He'd knock before entering, always respectful, but he lingered, especially if I was getting dressed. Sometimes he'd say he needed something, laundry, his charger, whatever, but he wouldn't rush to leave. His eyes would drift. They'd stop. They'd take a little too long on my bare shoulders, my legs, the curve of my waist. And I felt it. Not just his eyes. Something deeper. The awareness between us. He started complimenting my cooking. But not like most boys do. Not like, thanks, this is good. He'd say things like, you always add something extra. It's not just the food, it's the way it makes the room feel. I don't know how to explain it. It was subtle, but it stuck. Because Ethan used to say things like that. Before he stopped seeing me as someone who adds something extra. I told myself it was just kindness. That Liam was trying to settle in. That maybe he missed having a woman around who made him feel safe. I told myself he's just being sweet. He's lonely. I'm lonely. But even as I thought it, my pulse would quicken. When I caught his scent as he walked past. When his fingers grazed mine while handing me a dish. When his voice got low, almost soft, like he didn't want to break the moment, I felt it in my chest. In my stomach. In places I hadn't felt anything in a long time. That's when I started dressing with more intention. Nothing obvious. Nothing too tight or revealing. But I started choosing colors that flattered my skin again. I began brushing my hair before I came downstairs. Adding a little lip gloss before lunch. Not for Ethan. Not anymore. I told myself it was for me. That I just wanted to feel good again. That I had every right to take care of myself. But deep down, I knew who I was hoping would notice. And he did. One afternoon, I caught him watching me through the reflection in the hallway mirror. I was dusting the mantel, wearing a fitted top I hadn't worn in months. He wasn't staring. Not openly. But his gaze wasn't innocent. It wasn't casual. It was intentional. He held it long enough for me to notice. Then turned away, without apology. I kept telling myself this was dangerous. That I was supposed to shut it down. Redirect. Draw a line. But the truth? I didn't want to. I didn't want to disappear again. I didn't want to feel invisible. I didn't want to be the woman who just waited quietly for affection that never came. I wanted something. Maybe to feel desired. Maybe to feel alive. Or maybe just to feel anything. Was I being noticed? Or was I finally allowing myself to be seen again? Because for the first time in a long time, someone looked at me like I mattered. And I didn't stop him. It was a Saturday. The kind where the sky darkens too early. The kind where you feel something brewing long before it arrives. The storm rolled in slow thunder like a distant warning, clouds swollen with secrets. By late afternoon, the power flickered once, then vanished completely. No hum of the fridge. No soft whir of the AC. Just stillness. And rain. Steady. Heavy. Almost rhythmic. I lit a few candles, out of habit, not intention. One on the kitchen counter. One on the windowsill. One between us at the table. The room glowed gold. Soft. Dim. Honest. I sat down with a cup of tea, wrapping my fingers around the warmth. And then, Liam appeared. He didn't say a word. Just sat across from me. His presence felt different. Like something had settled in him, or maybe something had awakened in me. We didn't talk at first. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was curious. Open. Then, slowly, the words came. He told me about his childhood. How he used to press his ear to the bedroom wall, listening to his parents fight. How he hated how quiet his dad would get afterward. How he sometimes blamed himself for the divorce, even though he knew better. I told him about my past. How I met Ethan in a bookstore. How he used to write me little poems on napkins. How the poems stopped the same year the promotion started. He asked what I wanted to be when I was younger. A writer, I said. He smiled. You still could. I laughed, shaking my head. No one wants stories from someone who's invisible. He looked at me then, so deeply it made me want to look away. But I didn't. You're not invisible, he said. And I believed him. We sat like that for hours. Just talking about fears, losses, that one embarrassing moment in high school I hadn't shared in years. His dreams, my regrets. The storm outside raged, but inside, everything felt still. I reached for my mug at the same time he did. Our hands brushed. Warm, fleeting. I felt my breath catch. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away, and I didn't either. Later, after the rain slowed, I got up to clean the few dishes in the sink. He joined me without asking. I washed. He dried. And somewhere between the plates and the silverware, his hand brushed the small of my back. Not accidental. Not hesitant. It lingered. Soft. Certain. I froze. But I didn't move. I didn't step forward. I didn't shrug him off. I just stood there, letting it happen. And for a second, I closed my eyes. Because in that moment, it wasn't about lust. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was about being touched. Like I mattered. When we finished, I turned to thank him, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me. Not like a boy. Not even like a man. But like someone who was listening with his whole body. Like someone who needed to understand me to feel understood himself. I went to bed early that night. Or at least, I pretended to. That night, I dreamed of him. Of his hands. Of that quiet gaze that held too many unspoken things. Of the way my name sounded when he said it gently. And the guilt didn't come until the morning. When the light crept through the curtains. When I heard his footsteps downstairs. When I felt the heat still blooming under my skin. That's when it hit me. But by then, it was already too late. Something between us had shifted. And I didn't know how to shift it back. Ethan was still in Chicago. 3 days was the plan, but by day 4, I stopped checking my phone for updates. I knew better. He'd come back when he came back. And when he did, it would be the same routine. Door opens, suitcase drops, small talk, silence. So I stopped waiting. That morning, the house felt warmer than usual. Not from the weather, from something else I couldn't name. A tension in the air that clung to the skin. I stepped into the kitchen wearing a loose robe. It was soft, old, one of those things you wear when you stop caring who sees. Except, I didn't think anyone would see. I thought Liam had gone out. He'd left his sneakers by the door, and the house had that quiet, empty feel. I wasn't trying to be seen. Not deliberately. I was just existing. I reached for the cupboard, standing on my toes a little, the robe shifting with my body. And then I heard it. A breath. Low. Sharp. Close. I turned around slowly. He was standing in the doorway. Liam. Frozen. Eyes locked on me. And for a heartbeat, maybe longer, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. My hand instinctively touched the edge of my robe, but I didn't pull it tighter. I could have. I should have. But I didn't, because in that moment, I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel panic. I felt wanted, and I hadn't felt that in so long it almost hurt. He stepped forward. Not fast. Not hesitant either. Measured. Watching my face. Searching for a signal I never gave, but never denied. I didn't move. I didn't stop him. The silence between us, it was no longer just quiet. It was electric. Thick with all the words we'd never said. All the moments we had let linger too long. All the touches that almost happened but didn't. Until now. His hand brushed my arm. Slow. Purposeful. And I let him. Because this wasn't about love. It wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't even about him. It was about the ache. The hunger. The years of being untouched, unseen, unspoken to like I was a woman, and not just someone's wife. It was everything I had buried for years, clawing its way to the surface. He leaned in closer, and I let him. There was no resistance, no lines drawn, just two people, standing in the wreckage of everything they didn't say. His lips brushed mine, soft, tentative, waiting for rejection. But I didn't pull back. Because somewhere deep inside me, I wanted to feel something. Even if it was wrong. Even if it would burn everything down. It didn't last long, but it was enough. Enough to cross the line. Enough to change everything. When I opened my eyes, his were still closed. And I realized, in that moment, we weren't just caught up. We were past the point of return. There was no pretending anymore. No turning this into a misunderstanding. No brushing it off as a mistake. Because it wasn't just about what happened. It was about why I let it happen. Because I was starving. And I didn't even realize how deep the hunger went. Until he fed it. The next morning, the silence wasn't the same. It wasn't peaceful or empty or forgettable like before. It was loud, in the way silence becomes when something forbidden has filled the air, and now every breath feels like a confession. Liam didn't say a word. He came downstairs after I did, slower than usual, footsteps hesitant, careful, like each one might crack the floor beneath him. He didn't look at me. Not once. He grabbed a glass of water, sat at the far end of the kitchen table, and stared at nothing. I said, "Good morning," trying to sound normal. He nodded, but his lips didn't move. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sit. I just stood there, holding a cup of coffee I didn't drink, pretending I wasn't watching him out of the corner of my eye. And when I finally dared to meet his gaze, he turned away. Later that day, I heard the garage door open. Ethan was back. No warning. No text. No call ahead. He walked in like he always did, keys in one hand, phone in the other. He looked tired. Annoyed about traffic. Probably still thinking about work. He set down his suitcase, gave me a half smile, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. Just like always. Routine. Forgettable. He didn't notice the stiffness in my body. Or maybe he did and decided it wasn't worth asking about. Either way, he didn't ask. And that's when it hit me. How easy it was for him to slip right back into this space. Into this house. Into this life. As if nothing had happened. But something had happened. I glanced over at Liam, who was now standing by the kitchen sink. He was drying his hands with a towel, slow, focused. He still wouldn't look at me. But he didn't leave the room either. He lingered. Quiet. Present. And it felt like the air between us was filled with something no one else could see, but both of us felt. Something had been unlocked. Something neither of us could name out loud, but it pulsed there in the silence. Like a secret that wanted to scream. I started to feel sick. Not physically. Emotionally. The weight of what I'd done, it crept up behind me like a shadow. I tried to shake it off. Tried to clean, organize, fold laundry, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind numb. But every time I passed by Liam, the air would thicken again. And the worst part? There was guilt. Of course there was. But there was something else too. Something far more dangerous than guilt. Excitement. A whisper of adrenaline still rushing under my skin. A flicker of heat that hadn't burned out yet. A part of me that felt alive. And that terrified me. Because it meant I couldn't blame it all on loneliness. I couldn't say I was just confused. I couldn't pretend I didn't want any of it. Because I had. And part of me still did. That night, Ethan snored beside me. Same position. Same rhythm. Same distance between our bodies. Meanwhile, I laid there wide awake. Staring at the ceiling. Feeling the ghost of Liam's hand against my skin. My mind racing with every thought I wasn't allowed to think. What if I told the truth? What if I confessed? What if he came back into the kitchen and touched me again? What if I didn't stop him? I was unraveling. Quietly. Completely. And no one saw it happening. Except him. Was I a monster? Or just human? That question lived in the back of my throat for days after. Whispering itself every time I looked in the mirror. Every time I heard Liam's footsteps on the stairs. Every time Ethan brushed past me like I wasn't even there. I didn't seduce him. I didn't plan it. But I didn't stop it either. And maybe that's worse. Maybe knowing the line and still stepping over it. Maybe that makes you something else entirely. I kept replaying it, not just the kiss, not just the touch, but the silence after. The silence said everything we couldn't. Ethan and I sat at the dinner table like strangers, forced to share space. He talked about work, meetings, delays at the airport. I nodded, smiled where I was supposed to, but my mind wasn't there. It was hovering in that kitchen, in that quiet room, where everything changed. I didn't even taste the food anymore, didn't feel the fork in my hand. Because while he was talking, Liam was in the hallway, walking slow, passing by without speaking, but not without looking. His eyes flickered toward me, just for a second, but it was enough to send my heart pounding in my chest like a warning bell. Or was it a memory? I started questioning everything. My marriage. Was I ever really in it? Or was I just holding on to the idea of it because letting go would mean starting from scratch? Was I even a wife anymore? Or just a live-in assistant who folded his shirts and watered his plants? And what about me? Who was I? Who had I become? Was I still the woman who used to write love notes and dream of Tuscany? Or had I turned into someone who settled? Who accepted silence because it was easier than confrontation? Who buried her needs so deep it took the wrong person looking at her the right way to dig them back up? There's something cruel about sleeping next to someone who makes you feel completely alone. It's not the kind of loneliness that comes from absence. It's worse. It's the kind that happens in presence. When you share a bed, a life, a name, but not a heartbeat. Sometimes the loneliest place isn't being alone. It's lying next to someone who hasn't touched your soul in years. I used to tell myself I was strong for staying, for being the glue, for doing everything right. But lately I wonder, was I staying for love? Or just out of fear of what I'd find without it? Because truthfully, the night Liam touched me, I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive. And that scared me more than anything. Because what does it say about a woman when the first time she feels like she matters in years is in the arms of someone she should have protected instead? I started avoiding the mirror because I couldn't meet my own eyes. Not because of what I'd done, but because I wasn't sure I'd ever come back from it. Have you ever made a choice? Not because you wanted to, but because you didn't know how to say no. To yourself? Not out loud. Not to anyone else. But to that small, aching voice inside of you that's been whispering, please, just let me feel something again. Was I wrong for letting that moment happen? Or was I just human? Human, and starving for a kind of attention I hadn't felt in years. Starving to be touched, yes, but more than that. To be noticed. To be felt. To be seen, without asking. They'll say I should have known better. That I should have stopped it before it started. That I should have remembered who I was, what role I played. But what if I didn't forget? What if I remembered for the first time in years that I'm not just a wife, not just a stepmother, not just the one who holds things together while everyone else falls apart? What if I remembered that I'm still a woman? Tell me in the comments, was this betrayal? Or was it just a cry for connection? In the wrong place, at the wrong time? If stories like this stir your soul, if they make you reflect, question, feel even a little less alone, like this video and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Desire doesn't knock on your door wearing warning signs. It doesn't arrive with flashing lights or sirens. Sometimes, it comes dressed as a friend. Sometimes, as a child you helped raise. Sometimes, as a whisper that feels like warmth when you've been cold for too long. We cross lines not always in defiance, but in desperation. We reach not always because we're reckless, but because we're empty. And the world is full of people, waking up next to someone they once loved, wondering when the distance between their bodies became a canyon no one wants to cross. It's easy to judge from the outside, to point, to label, to condemn. But when you're the one lying awake at 2 a.m., when your own skin doesn't feel like home anymore, the lines between right and wrong start to blur. And when the silence returns, louder than before. All that remains is the question you never wanted to ask: what have I become?